Do you want to
get
started?
So without further ado, we're going to turn it over to our keynote sponsor, Synex. We're going to watch a quick video, and then you're going to hear from Sandy Stambaugh.
She's great.
She's amazing. The Vice President of Product Management. So go ahead and take a look.
At Synex, we take partnership seriously. Our job is to make yours easier. That means making sure all your product arrives on time, financing your biggest jobs, augmenting your service offerings, providing sales trainings. That's what we do. It's actually not as hard as one might think when you have the best vendors, the best services, the best pre- and post-sales support, the best financing solutions, the best people, and the best integration partners and customers in the world. Synex, we power your business and are excited to do it.
Welcome everyone to day 2 of the Design Conference. And thank you to Dave and Brian and to the entire teams at Avixa and Digital Signage Federation for coming together to present this conference, the conference on digital signage. And it's such an important time. I'm Sandy Stambaugh. I'm Vice President at Synex Corporation. I'm responsible for leading the digital signage practice at Synex under the umbrella you might have seen, VisualSolve. Our dedicated, certified, and industry-trained team delivers best-in-class pre-sales design, peer review, and collaboration, BOM creation, content support and development, configuration, integration, and installation, and also post-sale support. Combine this with an industry-leading line card of top-notch vendors and manufacturers, and some of the most committed employees in the business. And Synex is the destination for all things visual solutions, and especially digital signage. 2020 is one that will go down in the memory books. While it's been a challenging year for sure, at Synex, we believe there is no better time to be in the business of digital signage. In this time of such importance being placed on things like safe entry, safe space, and social distancing, digital communications is key. And as we open up and public spaces begin to get back to a sense of normalcy, whatever that means, we believe that there will be even more opportunity to provide cohesive technology designs, to create next-level customer experiences, and to provide meaningful analytics and reporting that only a digital signage network can provide. Today, I am so excited to have the opportunity to introduce someone that's been a who's who in the digital signage industry for as long as I can remember. A Senior Vice President of Marketing and Experience Planning and Design at Creative Realities, Beth Warren has an impressive history of brand development and delivering best-in-class customer experiences across multi-channel environments with some of the best-known brands in the world. I'm looking forward to hearing her insights today. Welcome, Beth.
Hey, great.
Hey there, how are you?
Thank you so much. I'm doing well, Sandy. How are you?
Good, I'm good. I'm so excited to hear you speak.
Oh, I'm super excited to be here, and I thank you for the lovely introduction. Are we ready to go?
I think so.
Excellent, excellent. So, no, I am, first of all, I just want to say how honored I am to have been invited to speak today. I'm so grateful for Avixa and DSF actually caring and sharing the passion that I have for a topic that I believe is going to be key to defending our value as an industry, and why what Laura landed on yesterday. Can you hear me okay, everyone? Am I good? Good. Thank you. Sorry about that. There was a little bit of background noise. So, and why what Laura landed on yesterday really, really resonated with me. And the reason I believe that breaking out of the box really sets our ambition for the industry and how we can come together as a collective and really raise the bar and make sure the work that we're doing can be future-proofed so that our industry really continues to grow and make the impact that we really needed to make. So that's why I'm here today. I'm going to talk a little bit about how to do that from a customer-centric, from a human-centric standpoint. But before we get into plannery of that nature, I just want to sort of start by talking about our world. This is a place that's familiar to all of us as integrators, as resellers, as pro AV builders, as designers. This is the world that we live in each and every day, and it is messy. It is demanding, and it can be at times thankless. And while our hands are filled trying to nail down multiple RFPs, issues with procurement, construction, the permits, risk, delays and more delays, the blame associated with delays, our clients' heads are down, and they're worried about if they're spending their CapEx budget wisely, and if it's actually even going to pay out. And that's so important for us to key into. In particularly now with the pandemic and digital acceleration, anxieties around how to do digital integration has accelerated because habits that should have taken nearly a year to acquire are really now our new normal. So this is worry on top of worry. Not only does our clients have to figure out what to do and how to do it, but are they doing the right thing? And how are we able to guide them? But at the end of the day, this is the biggest worry of all. Our clients are totally concerned about how to engage their target audiences as we all face another normal, and how this manifests itself across the environments that we work in, and how does it actually link back to that video wall that we saw a few slides ago that we just installed. And while we don't always have input on who the target is and what our point of view is about that, but we have to be as obsessed with solving pain points and really understanding the barriers to engagement. Because at the end of the day, if an end customer isn't doing what we need them to do, we can't necessarily justify the work that we do in our environments. So really, really reflecting on the barriers and those pain points that our digital solutions are attempting to solve is so important. It's really critical to keeping us valuable. And what's so important about sort of this piece is ensuring that before we do any sort of journey that we start with the human, because it starts with an individual, not with a screen, and why it's so important that we devise the journey and function of the human condition and what a human needs, and not overly device it. And what I'm suggesting is making the journey work from a human-centric point of view versus approaching it from a tech-centric point of view. And zooming out a bit and asking, how can we make it work for humans to connect with the things that they want, that they need, in places that they love? And this matters more than ever. And I just want to touch upon some digital realities. These are not trends. These are behaviors that are here to stay and will only accelerate. Certainly, the pandemic has brought these on even more so. They sort of flew at us, but I don't see these going away. And if we don't address them in the work that we're doing in a way that's native, we are not going to keep pace, and we're not going to stay on top of what's really, really important. So I just want to start off by talking about how on and offline channels are merging. And you see this, you see this every day. how the physical and the virtual have merged in ways we have never before seen. So you experience this when you're in Facebook Marketplace, Instagram buy button, the Amazon to go, Uber Eats, Instacart. If you engage in any of those platforms, you are experiencing on and offline merging right before our very eyes. So every touch point presents a shopportunity. Every time we engage in any kind of experience that brings the physical and the digital world, or the physical and the virtual world together, that's an example of what we mean. And so much so that it has now sort of shifted our focus away from making choices by channel to having it be totally fluid. And people can engage wherever their device takes them. So there's less loyalty to a particular channel because everything is so on demand. Back in the day when I first started out in brand management, Procter & Gamble coined this phrase, the first moment of truth. And that first moment of truth was always about what place, what venue, what retailer are you going to pick before you go out and get your shopping done. It's not like that anymore. There's a plethora of channels, and it typically starts right in your very hand. And this number 3 is really near and dear to our hearts, and I think something that we have to take very, very seriously. That digital first brands dominate. Okay, so those digital first brands, those e-commerce brands that come to market in new and innovative ways, they set the expectation of technology and how digital needs to perform in environments. And this is something that is totally characteristic and really influences the way in which our world at retail works, but also QSR, what's happening in stadiums, what's happening in airports. This sets the tone of how digital integration and digital experience needs to work. And by the way, digital first brands, they have an advantage. Number one, they make it frictionless. And because it's all in the cloud, it's so agile that they can sort of shift strategies and optimize the P&L on demand. And we don't have that advantage from a physical point of view. So what can we learn from digital first brands that will help us connect with consumers and important consumers in new ways, and do that in a way that's effective? And we have our digital natives to thank for this. This is Gen Z. We're going to talk about them in a few moments, but they are telling us that we need to move at a much faster pace than we have in the past and go beyond the screen. So this is sort of going to be the theme. If you can keep this notion, if the one thing that you can take away from our conversation today is, how do we make connections with the next generation of consumers who have grown up with phones in their hands? And that first generation is who we call Gen Z, and we're going to talk about them. And why it is so important, why our job is critical in terms of changing the conversation, so that technology that we install becomes experiences that we monetize, and that we move from what I like to coin the random act of digital, so that digital earns its right within the ecosystem. And instead of approaching technology for the sake of it, what is its purpose? What is the problem that we're solving? And how does it need to behave so that it does what we need it to do, and that engages in the way we need it to do? So pushing on this and having these tough conversations with our customers, with our clients at the beginning of a project is so critical, making sure that we earn our right at the table so we can influence this and make sure that we go from, again, tech-centric to human-centric. And so the central question becomes, how can digital inspire our consumers or our guests or our shoppers, whoever you want to call them, to act now? Because at the heart of it, an action is really a behavior in disguise that delivers a result, a business result, which tracks to a marketing objective, which can be measured, whether it's more sales or more orders or more frequent trips or inventory depletion. When you have your eye on behavior and how that trips to or connects to an objective, that's really when we can connect the dots much more closely to the role of what we do and why we do it and how we can do it. And we can make that linear connection back to the purpose and justifying what we do digitally so that it earns its right on, in store and on our plans. By understanding the barriers or the pain points, that allows us to tap the behaviors that are most fertile for engaging consumers, and then being able to plot that across key zones where it really matters most in our environment. I like to use this, I call it the 4 Eyes. It's a great little planning tool. You'll have this in the handout. And it's a great way to think, even if you're just sort of like working with these kinds of concepts for the first time in your projects, you can kind of take a step back and use this as a blueprint to think about, do I need to make impact? Where do I need to make it? How do I disrupt patterns? How can I inform and guide my consumers or the people who are visiting on site to where we want them to go? How can I inspire them? How do I make that shelf come to life? And how do we initiate conversations that are worth continuing? And how do we get our target to really want to talk with us and to keep that conversation going long after they leave? Which is why leading with 21st century language is so critical, so that we're speaking the parlance that our marketers speak, going from the right message to the content and culture, from right place to channel, from the right time to context, and from the right audience to community. So it's why in the abstract, in the description of this session today, why I was joking, sort of a little pun of a C comes before D. So the C's come always before the D in design: content, culture, channel, context, and community, because these will unlock the reasons why we would make the recommendations we do in tech design. So I hope that makes sense so far. So we're going to take a moment and talk about, this is like my favorite subject, talking about Gen Z. We don't know a ton about them because we've always been so millennial focused, but they are the first true digital natives. They're born between 1996 and 2010. They represent 72 million people in our country. This is a population that is the largest segment in our history. And they will have a massive impact on consumption. And they have a definitive role in driving technology in the context of consumption, and why it's so, so important for us to understand who they are and how to make meaningful connections with them. And I want to talk about what they value because it really drives how they behave, and it gives us clues as to how we need to connect with them in ways that maybe we haven't quite thought of, or we haven't really unpacked or really thought about from a strategic way. And we can use this as a lens through which design, technology, and content can really make much more of an impact than perhaps it has in the past. So let's start by talking about what's really important to them. First of all, this audience is much less acquisitive and much more inquisitive. So what does that mean? Acquiring knowledge is going to be way more important to this audience than things. They are a generation of learners. They access information, they can cross-reference, and they develop a point of view very, very quickly because they're so fluent in tech, and it's an enabler for this group. And that's how they kind of keep us honest too, because they can fact check very, very easily. Experience and access is more important than ownership. And this is a big idea. This is a big concept. And I think we'll explain some of the trends that we see, from vintage clothing to online learning to subscriptions and things like TikTok and community hubs. They are pragmatists and realists at heart, and they're very, very comfortable browsing, renting, subscribing, and recycling. Those types of things are really important because at the end of the day, this audience is really looking for authenticity. And experiencing authenticity is as important as being able to access it. So something to really keep in mind. They are radically inclusive. Okay, they're not a binary group. Their individuality is sacrosanct for them, and they embrace diversity more so than any group that has come before them. Since they are the most diverse group in U.S. history, they recognize it, they celebrate it, and they want to be recognized as an individual, not a collective. So things like personalization are going to be more important in the work that we do in our integration than ever. So that's going to be an important fact that we have to address as a group and keep in mind. Peer trust is an attribute of this segment, clearly, but what differentiates them from the generation before, which is the millennials, is that they seek out those who are in the know, so key influencers, more so than clinging to the hive mentality. And I like that because it sort of sets this generation apart. You know, they're about finding the experts and being able to really follow them and learn from them versus, oh my goodness, what does my group think? So social proof from that perspective is going to really play well in the work that we do when we're meant to engage them. And of course, it's always going to weigh more than what brands have to say, than what government has to say, than what authority has to say. So we can play to that strength. We can play to that a little bit more strongly than perhaps we've seen in the work that we're doing in stores and in different environments. And we'll talk about that in a little later on. Since these folks are real activists at heart, transparency for this group, it takes on a real new meaning, a whole new meaning, and it's fundamental in driving trust, especially when it comes for big brands. So this group is going to hold us accountable. They're going to hold our clients accountable. They're going to ask, is it sustainable? Are your practices ethical? Where has it been sourced? What's the impact on the planet? Because they are socially responsible. And I'm going to tell you, this is the generation that's going to save us as we age because they're committed to saving the planet. It's really important to them. So the degree that we can address this in the way in which we develop content, in the way in which we help our brands go to market, it's just going to be a real opportunity for us to another mode of connection that is authentic. But I think the best news of all is that Gen Z loves brick and mortar. In studies that were done by McKinsey, 67% prefer the physical experience. It's just where self-expression can happen, and they seek out unique spaces and places that they can relate to. So the degree that we can use digital to help differentiate, it's going to be really important to sort of springboarding us to another level and really raising the bar. And it's our responsibility to figure out that interplay between the physical and the virtual, to hold their attention and to echo their values in a way that is relevant and meaningful. And I just threw this next slide in. I just thought it was terrific because you can take a real look back between the cohorts in our country right now, from the boomers to the Gen X to Gen Y, or also known as millennials, to Gen Z, and really focus in on the behaviors and the consumption patterns that are characteristic of these important segments, with Gen Z being the biggest we'll have ever seen in US history again. So the last part of our conversation is about things that we can do now. This is sort of like how I like to characterize those things that I think are impressive, that can make impact, that can help us connect in ways that we're going to need to do more wholesale, more institutionally. I don't always see it out there, but when I do, I make a note of it, and it's something that I sort of want to put on your radar to really push things forward for us. So the first I want to say is, let's make check-in a thing. Make it a thing. Welcome guests personally. And it goes back to this need for individuality and personalization and recognition. It also provides a role for the mobile to accompany and not overtake the journey. So instead of just focusing on what happens at checkout, focus on what happens when someone checks in and build a story around that and make that part of the journey so that it's organic. It also gives the sales associate something really important to do right when someone walks through the door. The next thing is, you'll think this is obvious, but it isn't so obvious, but bring social in store. Go from social media to social selling. It's a mode of self-expression. It brings community together, and it provides an endless font for content. And this is something we can do right now. And big brands like Under Armour have done it really well. But I'd like to see a little bit more of this, so I think we have an opportunity to push it. While we're talking about that, that sort of individual, relevance, that sort of leads me to the next point, which is go local, not loco. And that's just a reminder that reflecting things of the local community is really, really important. It just makes the experience way more intimate. Reflecting things like local inventory, local events, things that are happening in the community that you serve is going to be another important way to make relevant connections with this important target that's coming in. It also builds trust too, because you're standing for something, and if you're standing for something, your audience will be able to not only respect that, but be able to relate to it in new ways. And instead of speccing that next video wall, think about how you can create some digital dissonance. And what I mean by that is mixing large scale and human scale, combining physical and digital, glorifying product, and then the storytelling around it that makes it come to life. And just a little shout out here to the QR code, because I think it's coming back. And how can we use that to our advantage to help people put information in their hands so that they can take with them. So think about dissonance, because it really does break patterns and creates an element of surprise. Which brings me to the next opportunity as we try to break out of the the rectangle, get my shapes in order, as we try to break out of the rectangle, is how do we use simple technology in new ways? These are my two favorite examples of late. How do we use sensors and triggers that make sense and just allow us to just create a little learning experience? Simple things like lift and learns just really drive engagement and provide a little bit of surprise, and sort of makes this whole notion of discovery a little bit more fun, and something that you want to expect, you tend to lean into. We often hear about, hey, why don't we just bring, the world of online in the store? And I struggle with that because, number one, why duplicate or replicate something that you can do in your hand when you're home? What is the purpose and what's really the meaning of that? But going from e-com to what I call s-com or shop-com does make sense. So how can we go beyond just bringing a website in? How do we adapt it so that it becomes a way to be able to enhance the experience and be able to create perhaps a more effective sales associate tool so that we can serve up what else? And that's important, because you don't really want folks having a DIY experience. When they're coming to brick and mortar, they're coming because they want to touch and feel and because they want to get that level of service. So think about that. How can you just sort of avoid e-com kiosk mode and really take that and create something that will serve, hey, what else does this go with? What else can I get? What else can I need? What inventory is available for me to take with me or to have sent to my home? Take checkout personally, and give the consumer, the shopper, your guest, a reason to feel recognized, feel appreciated, feel thanked. And to want to continue the conversation and to encourage them to return. There's a few brands that do this really, really well. And I don't see enough of this where when I go out, I take my receipt or I have my receipt sent to me. And then when I open my phone, if I'm thanked for that, and if it connects me to some of the stuff that I looked at in store that I might want to come back for later on, or perhaps buy when I'm off site, or share or socialize, I think this is the key to making sure that connections that we build with our target are real, they're relevant, and they're actually of value. So having said all that, I want to leave us with a little bit of tough love. I was talking to clients every single day. I see lots of things that repeat them. There's a lot of recurring themes in the questions that I'm asked, and I'm summarizing them with these top 6. Okay, number 1, solve the barrier and the pain point, and if it doesn't drive a behavior, rethink it. And that's really important for us to square with. Don't replicate what can be done at home. Make it so that it works within the environment and will help lead somebody to complete behavior or complete an action. Give mobile a purpose. It has a purpose all the time anyway. So don't have it take over the journey. You want to have it work with the journey. So think through the role of mobile and be able to lean in on that. Resist the Swiss Army knife. So what do I mean by that? Keep functionality simple. Don't have one thing do 5. Have one thing do it simply. And be prepared to set KPIs and to measure, because what's measured has meaning and proves value for the next project, and also connects the dots, improves our worth. That the time that we take to make meaningful connections by understanding the target and what's important to them and the values that they have, and we reflect that back to us, then that makes the entire ecosystem more connected, more intelligent, and certainly more impactful. And Laura Davis Taylor and I were talking about coming back in the next virtual summit and talking about some measurement practices against this, so that we can then begin to educate us even more about the analytics piece and getting that right. So that's my wrap up for today, and I hope this was of value and was helpful. There's a bonus slide after this one for those who are going to take a look at this a little later on. And feel free to incorporate this in the work that you're doing. So thank you.
Hey, Beth, this is Gary Kay. How are you doing?
Hello, Gary.
Hey, if you remember, we're going to do a little bit of Q&A here. I got a couple of questions for you. Are you still up for that?
Sure. I'm very up for it.
Good.
Yep, bring them on.
So one of the things, first off, I loved your presentation. And while you're delivering the presentation, this is what it reminded me of. And I know this is going to be a crazy analogy, but this is my analogy. Back in 2010, Steve Jobs stood in front of everybody and introduced the iPad. And he was, and everyone looked at it at that time and was like, why do we need this? Or why are you showing us this? This looks like a big iPhone that doesn't make phone calls. All of a sudden, it outsold within 5 years, started outselling laptops and became one of the biggest selling computers, even though it was a tablet, of all time. And it created an entire industry. Your presentation reminds me of that. I know that's a crazy analogy, but here's why. A lot of people that are on here today may not realize why they need to know this information. They may be listening to it saying, I'm not selling retail. I'm not going after the digital signage retail market. And all of a sudden they're going to be in a meeting months from now, a year from now, and they're going to remember what you just talked about, Gen Z and how they're different than millennials, and millennials are how they're different from my age group and your age groups. And then they're also going to remember some of the user interface and UX and CX experience things. And then it's going to put things together. What I see is a merging of digital signage, which right now is mostly in experiential advertising, and AV, and it's been rapidly accelerated because of COVID-19, as I mentioned yesterday to Laura. So what I would like to add, and some of the questions that are coming in are similar to this, is where's the low-hanging fruit? Like, what segments of the market should we go after?
What segments of the market in terms of verticals that we should go after?
Yeah,
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, vertical.
Well, verticals. Is that my understanding of the question?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
cool.
verticals.
So QSR number one. That's such a big one. It's because food and beverage is it's recession proof. There's some friction in it. Okay. So any place where we can remove friction and use technology to get something in someone's hands, I think is low hanging fruit. Retail, absolutely. Hospitality is another one that I think that this can really help with and revive hospitality. That's an important one. In addition to retail, remember, retail is only the example. The examples that I talked about in retail can really apply to any of these verticals, and I hope that rings true.
So in the case of hospitality, that I think is a great crossover market between commercial AV and signage, because we're doing a lot of work in hospitality in obviously hospitals and hotels and services businesses that'll come back quickly. It's going to be more than just directional signage, right? What are the opportunities? Like what kind of things, if I'm an AV integrator and I want to go after that segment of the market with signage, what should I lead with?
Well, I think we have to figure out,
or do I lead with something else?
Well, as Laura said yesterday, follow the pain point. I think that we have to address the impacts of COVID and make people feel confident and safe before they're going to want to go any place and spend time in an environment. So that's first and foremost. The second thing I think we need to do that I want to see more profoundly solved for is the interaction between the mobile and the sign. Because if we can connect those two so that they work, more diligently and more, in a way that's more considered, I think that will help as well. Even if it's wayfinding from your wayfinder device to your phone, to being able to take information with you, to be able to check in and to be able to help guide you along the way. I think those things are going to be really, really important because it goes from passive, something that's really passive, to something that enables you as you're in a place, really make the most of your time there.
You in your wrap up said resist the Swiss Army knife. Okay. And then followed it up with keep functionality simple. Now, the irony of that statement to me is most of the companies that have all these all-in-one solutions, like, for example, display companies that have media players and everything built in, they're promoting them to be simple solutions. But what you're saying, I think, is that although those are all-in-one systems, they're not scalable and they can't give you the opportunities for other impacts and other opportunities in the future for differences, or what are you saying there?
This is all about the front end. This is about what the user sees. So I love anything all in one with multiple functions. And I think that's important because what that helps us to do as designers is be able to pick and choose the things that are going to make the biggest difference based on what behavior you're seeking in the here and now. So what I mean by that is, if you're looking at an interactive experience, have it do one thing and do it really well. Have it help me make a decision. Have it, show me the fits. Tell me what this goes with. Allow me to order. Just present the buy button to me. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So it's about serving up a content experience that's single-minded and that isn't it isn't so multifaceted, because people's attention spans aren't that big, and also how much time are they going to give you in a space or a place? So that's really what that was meant to be. That was not meant to tell the industry that they shouldn't provide lots of functionality to us. They absolutely should, but the way we present that to the customer, to the consumer, should be single-minded.
Okay, so single-minded in the sense that you're going after one approach, solving one problem at a time, even though it has other
solve one problem at a time. You got it.
So one of the pieces that I think has been missing the missing link between where digital signage, experiential, and all this has gone. And the AV integrator has been the creative. Okay, so we've provided the hardware, we've provided the CMS, right? And a lot of the companies out there that are doing this, like BrightSign is a sponsor of this event. They have an incredible CMS. They have media players. They have a cloud-based system. But the creative has been the weakening link. Yeah, the creative has been the weak link, right? So where did the AV integrator stop, or should they get into the creative services side of things? And how do they break into that?
I don't know if they need to get into the creative services, but they could use their partners to do that. This is a real partnership opportunity. You know, the one thing that AV integrators have as an advantage, a competitive advantage over ad agencies, is they understand the environment, right? And that is permission to guide how content really needs to come to life. So I'm an integrator, and we happen to deliver content for our clients because that's in our DNA at Creative Realities. And I always use that as our special sauce. You know, I don't want to necessarily create new material, but what I want to do is take all that good brand stuff out there and repurpose it so that it works really strongly inside an environment. And I think for AV integrators that are really working with tech and hardware and software, I think that there's a lot of partners out there that can help them instead of them having to do it themselves.
Yeah, so you're recommending that instead of trying to create an entire creative division, that they should go out proactively and partner with all the agencies in their area. Is that what you're saying?
I don't know about agencies per se. I mean, they can partner with agencies for sure. Okay. But if their agencies will allow them to be able to, you know, this is a very dicey situation because there's a lot of stakeholders and there's a lot of, you know, people holding on to their territory, you know. But I think there's plenty of integrators out there who actually deliver content creation and content management and content curation that don't compete with agencies, that will align quite nicely with an AV company, like a company like mine. So we can do that. So and yours.
I'm interestingly enough, Friday I'm going to visit an agency in Greenville, South Carolina. Now they have a small office in New York, but they have a big office in Greenville, South Carolina. One of their clients is Bojangles. Of course, everyone likes Bojangles in the South, chicken biscuits. But in their case, they don't have the technology. They have the creative, but they don't have the technology. So what they actually want to do is they want to proactively partner with the tech provider. I love it. And it's interesting because they look to the IT world. I think Synex could be the bridge to that. It was interesting that Sandy came on early because Synex has both the IT side and the AV side. They could be the bridge to that. But I think they didn't even know about the AV side. They knew about the IT and the literal computer infrastructure side, but they didn't think of AV outside of live events.
So true. And that's why I don't like to speak to IT people, because they're just going to give me the bandwidth. Give me the bandwidth. Give me a hardline connection. Don't make me use Wi-Fi. That your job is done, okay? It's really the AV folks that really understand space and understand scale. Not only human and life scale and the physical environments, but they also understand how to scale out, how to take a concept, an idea, and create it and stamp it from 1 out to 1,000. So I love the idea of AV integrators partnering with other AV integrators who know how to build content, but also with agencies who have great instinct for brand and consumer communication, but don't understand how technology needs to plug in to be able to enable that.
Yeah, in fact, I spoke at an agency event not too many months ago, where one of the keynote speaker at the event actually made an interesting observation. He said he thought in 2021 that the future of the agency is they're going to have to become tech providers, because they're getting asked a lot of tech questions, and they're getting asked, it's not stopping at the user experience, it's stopping at, it's continuing beyond the first CTA into the full user experience. So they're becoming tech providers as well, and they don't want to have their own AV integration company.
No, I think I agree with you. But no, I agree with you. And I think it's going to be about
Okay.
software for them, because they're creating platforms that engage on some level and connect to a back end. So agencies are going to have to be very software savvy. The last thing we need is agencies to be doing more hardware, because that's kind of really outside their wheelhouse. But production and development is right inside their wheelhouse. And instead of creating 30-second television commercials, they're going to be creating software platforms and creating products, because products are going to be more software experiential than we've ever seen before. So I do think the agencies are going to have to get savvy about that.
Yeah, and I mean, that's proven out on the consumer side, where agencies are having to produce content for social media, where they were doing it all in the commercials side of things. The fact of the matter is, if you look at digital advertising, it's almost half of all total worldwide global ad spend, whereas 5 years ago it wasn't even 10%. Well,
I have a little sort of bit of a consternation. I don't square entirely with digital advertising, because the work that we do as an industry has to be contextual and has to have content that makes sense inside the space that you're in. So I struggle with the word advertising and monetization through ad revenue models as it relates to bringing content into spaces. So I invite the audience to think through what that actually really means. And in the cases of airports, I get it. Okay. In big arenas, I get it. But in other spaces that are commercially oriented, where every word counts, every communication piece needs to earn its right, I just truly believe that content and context override putting ads in a place that don't necessarily contribute to behaviors in the here and now.
Yeah. It's interesting that your session perfectly moves into the next session. The next session is about selecting the right media player. And instead of doing that as one person presenting how media players work, we actually put together a panel of 3 people that have been in the digital signage industry for, if you combine their years, 45 years. One of them came from an interior design background and a design background. One has been at a manufacturer the whole time. The other one's been at both the integrator and the manufacturer side. That's going to be a great session. That starts at 12:05. Don't forget about that session, because that works really well into what you just said. One last thing. You've been a big active part of the digital signage industry for many years, and actively involved in the Digital Signage Federation. Now, the Digital Signage Federation and AVIXA have gotten together, and they produced this event. There'll be other events, I'm sure, in 2021. They're talking about doing something at Infocom. If I'm a beginner, let's say I'm on this today and I love digital signage, but I'm a beginner, where should I start? Should I start with the DSF education, the certification that they have there? Should I start with jumping right into the case studies and learning about it through the case studies? For example, we have case studies at the end of the day today. Where would be what would you say the first thing they should do outside of today?
I think you should definitely be a member, for sure, of both of the DSF and AVIXA, because we each have a different point of view, but they're both really important. We come at it a little bit differently, but we kind of balance one another and support one another. So I think that is really important. And what I encourage our organizations to do is to continue pushing design thinking, because at the end of the day, the reason why we're in this business and the reason why we're doing what we're doing is because we're moving. We're inspiring consumers. That's the point. So understanding the technical piece is one thing, but we're going to really, I think, be much better enabled to talk about how consumers respond to the work that we do and how that proves our value.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So definitely start there.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. The DSF education and AVIXA's education for years has been the key to the industry in both sides. And I think not leading with the hardware and leading with the experience was great advice from both you and Laura. We have a lot more to cover. This was just the very beginning of a long 8-hour day, but it's going to go by so quick because the content is so awesome. And I'm excited that you're here. Participate, network with your friends below. We're taking it back to the studio, and the two ladies in the studio, you own the day.
Thank you. Thanks, Gary.
Thank you.